Welcome to the fourth edition, fourth episode on social science and its elements in cybersecurity. And to have this conversation, I have with me Donavan Cheah, a well-known, reputed cybersecurity professional based out of Singapore. And he's spent a significant amount of time talking about various aspects of social science or social elements which impact cybersecurity in the previous episodes 1, 2, and 3. And if you have not watched them, please make time to watch it. And today, he's here to talk about social engineering. And I'm all ears to hear from him, his perspective about this, because this is a huge topic. And we can probably talk all day long. But I would like to hear from you, Donovan, your experience, what you see as to how this is impacting cybersecurity. Donovan, you.
Thank you so much. I mean, since this is a interdisciplinary podcast, I thought I would like to give a bit of a history lesson, right, behind social
Please
engineering.
do.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, the term social engineering is not new, and the reason why it's not new is because we have seen this happen even before the days of the internet, right? Like, for example, think of it this way. Maybe when we were children, we wanted to find ways to get extra candy, right? Even though we're not allowed to. So what we do is we'll find all sorts of ways and means to try to, convince our parents that we deserve an extra candy. Okay? So some ways of convincing, maybe a bit more nefarious than others, and in effect, that is social engineering. Okay? But let's talk about some examples which are probably more relevant to the internet age. We remember with the advent of email also came the advent of very strange Nigerian princes that seemed to be really, really rich, and they all had, for some reason, wanted to give away their wealth. Very quickly, people realized that this was obviously nonsense because, which prince would be so generous to give away their wealth? But like it or not, people actually fell for those in the past, right? So clearly, there's some psychological weaknesses. People wanted money, so they fall for it. Then I think we also had other kinds of social engineering attacks whereby start to say things like, scare you into saying, hey, and this one for some reason occurs quite a lot from Ireland because Ireland happens to have a bustling stock exchange. So people do business there. And so you see something like this. The tax department says that you have unpaid taxes and stuff like that. So can you please reconcile this by clicking here? Right? And this might sound familiar to you as well because for a period of time, this was the in thing, right? Not filing taxes or reconciling accounts and stuff like that. Right. At the heart of it, or the whole point of me explaining all of these is that there's a certain psychology of persuasion. And what we really are saying is that we're trying to prey on a certain human weakness to convince them to do something that they normally would not have done. Essentially, that's social engineering. Okay.
Yes.
So I mean, over the years, of course, social engineering campaigns became more and more sophisticated. For one, the English started getting better because the target audience was quite different. So I remember this case where this example where I asked some people, hey, why is it that Nigerian prince scams, Irish tax refund scams, and some of these other scams have such bad English? Because if you looked at some of the older scams, you will realize that the English is always bad. Spelling mistakes, typos, everything, And so you wonder, why are they worse than an average guy? So somebody explained, and this is actually quite a convincing explanation. And he goes, actually, in some cases, the errors are deliberate. And the errors are deliberate because they are going after a certain target audience. And here, this is how it works, right? It's like a bit of a carpet bombing strategy, right? You send out a mass email to everyone, okay? And this is the old days, right? Before you have newer terms, right? You carpet bomb everyone. People who throw away your email probably know better, so they know that's not your target audience. So don't bother, right? So if they're smart enough to realize this is a scam, don't bother trying to send an email again because you're wasting your time. And if anything, you would get yourself detected, which is worse. Okay. So what do you do with the people who actually respond? Well, there are some people who will respond despite the bad English because they themselves are not very literate. So these are the kinds of people who you will squeeze every dime out of them. So this is how this guy explained it. Well, I got it. I understood this. So, okay. But now, if you look at the modern day social engineering attacks, they look nothing like this.
Correct.
The English can be quite good, and especially in Singapore, some of the more convincing attacks, I must say, are really professionally done. And the reason is because, well, if you look at it from a cultural context, Singapore has very high literacy rates. So if you see an email with broken English, you will think it's a scam email and you will delete it,
Absolutely.
right?
Right
So
away.
So it's all about the psychology. It's all about understanding who you're targeting. And that is why you have such attacks. At one period of time, people were phishing over the phone, right? Pretending to be call centers announcing that you won lucky draw prizes. Okay.
Yeah.
But then if you wanted to go after a high value target, like a CEO of a company, you won't cover bomb, because if you cover bomb, some employee will go, hey, there's a phishing campaign going on. I'm not the CEO. Why are you claiming I'm the CEO? And he will tell the CEO this, and the CEO goes, this is weird. Maybe we shouldn't open emails of this sort. So that's why you have spear phishing campaigns that came in, where they target a specific guy, a specific entity, specially crafted to target what a CEO's weakness might be. For example, a CEO might not have time. So if it doesn't have time, it may not carefully read his email, or his or her email. Or in some cases, you don't target the CEO directly, you target the likely readers of the email. So it could include the CEO, but could also include personnel who the CEO will blindly forward something to, or the secretary. So here we go back once again to understanding the target. So once again, psychology of persuasion.
Would you also take it as trust?
Would you take into consideration trust? Well, of course, we are trying.
Going back to our previous conversation, right? In
Yes, yes,
episode 3, we
exactly,
spoke
right.
about what you call community manipulation, and it appears to have come from me. In essence, it is not me, but you trust me,
Yeah,
but you don't do the validation. So,
correct. Exactly. Exactly. That's why when we talk about the technical aspects of spear phishing, you will do things like trying to craft your email. For example, if it's an email attack, right? You'll craft it in a way that looks like it belongs to a certain domain name, because if it belongs to a certain domain name, then people will say, oh, that's internal company email. I have to click it. A good example, many companies, right? They probably still use primitive software to manage business functions. Primitive software here means Microsoft Excel, because Microsoft Excel has some built-in macros, right? And so there are many
yeah,
enterprises that still use macros. So if you send an Excel macro file and you claim it's an internal company processing software, people might actually fall for this, because they feel,
absolutely.
hey, this looks legit. We need to know this. So you disguise this as, oh, this is a process update. All the Excel sheets that you were using are invalid because of some restructuring. The names of the entities have changed. The charge rates have changed. Here's the new macro. You would definitely get a few victims, because people say, I don't want my boss to scold me. I want my stuff fast. So I better listen to the company memo. Right? So trust is always a critical element in any phishing campaign. But trust in what, right? In this case, it's trust in a certain weakness of a human, in this case, the weakness of fear. In the case of a CEO, could be weakness of rushing for time, right? Or in the case of a Nigerian prince, greed.
Greed, yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Mm.
How does greed come into such extent when it comes in? And I mean, what I've actually seen is it's the people who have a lot of money who keep falling into that trap.
Mm. I'll tell you why. Because if you have no money, no one wants to come after you, right? So many of these organizations, I say the word organizations without apologizing, it's because that's how these syndicates run. So they don't run it as a solo fishing operator. They don't run it as like a motley crew, but it's actually well orchestrated. Now, let me give you an example in Singapore, because Singapore, we are quite rich. And if you're quite rich, we fall for all sorts of campaigns, right? So we talk about social engineering campaigns. We fall for this because well, we are very popular targets. I think even in Singapore, we are, I think, the number one country, or maybe number two, I cannot remember offhand, that has lost money per capita to all sorts of scams. So there is a certain bias here. Why we fall for it? Is it because we're necessarily more gullible? I don't know. But what we know is that if a successful attack happens, okay, the organization, the phishing organization, is going to get away with more cash than say if we fish somebody, in a certain country with a lower standard of living. Because now you convert it to US dollars, obviously, you convert Sing dollars to US dollars, he's going to get more money than converting, say, somebody's currency in, say, Afghanistan or something, right? Apologies to whoever is listening because I needed to find a country of reference, but you get the idea,
Yeah.
right? So you get the point here. So in some sense, we need to think of this as a survivorship bias issue, right?
Right.
Is it that Singaporeans are necessarily more gullible? Actually, I don't think so because we run lots of cyber awareness campaigns. It's just that we are so attractive.
Oh, so my final question for this
Yes.
episode: how do you break this trend?
Hmm.
It, I mean, I remember, right? I mean, I've been working in Singapore. I
Yes.
started working in Singapore way back in '98, and then I was doing, security related work,
Hmm.
cybersecurity related work way back in 2006. And Singapore was one of those early countries which focused a lot on security. At that time, we talked about information security. So there were various programs which were initiated by the government.
Yeah.
Private sector organizations had their own set of programs. So if you look at from a cyber maturity perspective, Singapore is way ahead in terms
Yes.
of their knowledge, skill, and capability.
Correct.
And yet, if you say that per capita that
Yeah.
Singapore has fallen victim to cyber crime,
Yes.
how do we break this trend? Because why I'm asking this question is, can we learn something from you all so that the other emerging countries can adopt those, or organizations which are operating in other regions, can they incorporate some of the experiences which you had? If you have something, you can share, Donovan.
Okay, one solution I definitely don't advocate is to become poorer. Okay, because if you become poorer, people won't target you as much. But I don't think that's what the I don't think that's the solution you're looking for. So let's look at something
Absolutely
more
not.
practical, right?
Yes, that's
Okay.
right.
Yes. I think the people who learn best from attacks are people who have actually been scammed before. Ideally, not too much money, so they don't actually lose their life savings or something like this. I'll give an example because this happened to somebody I know. Right, somebody I know actually lost money in the cryptocurrency scam at age
Mhm.
13. Okay, so we asked two questions. First question is how much you lost, but maybe the second more important question is how did you even gain access to a cryptocurrency wallet to get scammed in the first place? Right? But
Yeah.
herein lies a silver lining, and the silver lining is this. This guy learned about the dangers of overly trusting, in this case, I think meme coin or something, right? At a very young age. At a very young age, you learn fast. You learn fast, you probably will remember to be less trusting. So I think it is important for people to learn by, I guess, failing early, hopefully not too costly, right? But we cannot engineer failures, you see. So ideally, it means also when you start children from a young age, you have some sandbox environments, right? You encourage your child to explore a little bit, and you totally expect that something will happen, okay? But instead of blaming your child, right, teach the child what went wrong, and from there, given that learned experience, I think a child will be much, much, much better equipped to, I would say, realize what is likely a scam, what's likely phishing, and what's not really that, right? So I think that is one useful way to look at it. And I think, um, as we always say, culture is so hard to change. So I guess one way to do it is to start with our young. Okay. What about the older ones? For the older ones, it's going to be a bit difficult. We have to keep trying to teach them, hey, you need to be careful about this. Introduce safeguards. So in Singapore, the local banks have all introduced safeguards such that there will be this kitty, there will be this account where you have to actually go through more hoops to be able to access it, in the hope that by forcing these hoops, somebody thinks, hey, why is this guy telling me to go through all these hoops? Can this person really be trusted? But at the end of the day, I think this whole element of trust is such an important topic. It's not talked about enough because you see, it can go both ways, right? So it's such a interesting topic, as you rightly point out. We can go on this forever and ever, but maybe let's not do that to spare our listeners, right? And just sum
Absolutely.
up to say that when
Yeah,
we talk about learning from failures, it is always it is always good to remember that we build a culture where we learn from failures and understand that humans, being fallible, will at some point in time fail, right? You hear cybersecurity professionals fall for scams too, right? I think Troy Hunt recently himself fell for a social engineering attack. So, I mean, with a security professional like he himself falling for such stuff, um, what does that make our users? Last thing you want to do is to blame them, because the more you
yeah,
blame your users, the more they will say, I don't trust these cyber guys because these cyber guys just keep scolding me and they get tuned out. And then they will just keep falling for scams and phishing attacks over and over
yeah,
again. So that's not what we want. We want to build a culture of learning.
absolutely. And I think in closing, my thoughts are that it is very difficult for the human brain to understand anything negative.
Yes.
You tell the child don't do something,
Mm,
and the child will do exactly the same
mm,
thing. And I'm sure, Donovan, you and I have done the same thing when our parents said don't do something. And I think that's the first thing we did when they were out of sight,
yes,
right? Yeah, and it
exactly.
is true, irrespective of the age group,
Mm,
everyone does the same thing. While
yeah.
we keep saying that, be
Mm,
careful,
mm,
don't click on something,
yeah.
or don't speak to strangers, we end up doing the same thing.
Yeah. Mm,
So I guess we need to build trust networks where we learn
yes.
from each other.
Correct.
And also, we need to work on becoming collective, resilient communities.
Exactly
And
that. Right.
right,
Mm,
so that's what is the need of the hour. So, with
mm,
that thought, I would like to wrap up this session. Donovan, thank you so much for your time.
yeah.
And viewers, please look out for our next episode, the last and the final for the series on social science elements in cybersecurity, and where we are going to be talking about cyber mediated communication. I'm not going to explain what that is, and I'm going to let Donovan speak about that when we come on the next episode. Thank you so much, and hit the subscribe button, follow us, and tell us what you'd like to hear more in our future episodes. Thank you so much.